Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn with the SLSO. I'm Sherry Sissac, a fourth-year board member of the SLSO and Deputy Director of the Regional Arts Commission. Today, we'll hear perspectives from some remarkable women of your symphony. We invite you to ask questions about the chat function throughout today's Lunch and Learn. We will take a few questions at the end of each segment. At the end of today's talk, we'll show a short video of bassoonist Felicia Foland and one of her students playing a duet. Finally, we'd like to extend our special thanks to the SLSO 2020-2021 Classical Series sponsor, the Stewart Family Foundation. Let's welcome our first guest. Marie-Hélène Bernard is the SLSO's president and CEO and recently celebrated her 5-year anniversary with the orchestra. And we also have Elizabeth Mannen, has been an SLSO board member for 4 years and is also the managing director of investments at Mannen Financial Group at Wells Fargo Advisors. So we'll start with Marie-Hélène. So Marie, you've been in the orchestra field for 25 years, leading orchestras for 15 years. What is your observation about the role of women in shaping orchestras?
Good afternoon. Glad to be here and to share this panel with you and remarkable women at the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. I entered the field in 1996 after practicing tax law for several years in Canada. When I entered the field, there were 4 women CEOs leading major orchestras in our country. Now there's 8 of us 25 years later. So the good news is we have doubled the women of female CEOs in leadership positions of our largest budget orchestras in the country, which are 20 million and above. I think when it comes to the role, it's clear that orchestras are a reflection of our community. And over the years, and when I came to the St. Louis Symphony in 2015, already half of our orchestra was made of women. And the board at the St. Louis Symphony went from having no women within its rank 40 years ago to now having 50% women. So I think when it comes to the role, the reasons that women are attracted to leadership and the ways they lead is really informed by their connection to the community and ways that they really truly are highly adaptable to transformative moments and change. And I think it's clear in the last 25 years that orchestras have faced an evolution that's really, really exciting. And now in this pandemic, that is truly shaping a future that will be wildly different. And I think women's adaptability and ability to also shape a narrative that's around community is truly essential. So that's how I see their role in shaping the future of orchestras.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène, and that's really interesting. I like to bring Elizabeth in just again, the numbers you made reference to are quite interesting and quite remarkable. But again, I know that some of those numbers can somewhat be transferred to other industries, but again, I'd like to get some perspective from Elizabeth. So what about the SLSO made you want to be part of this incredible institution? And so what drew you to the SLSO? Elizabeth.
Well, thank you, Sherry, and thank you, Marie-Hélène. It's good to see faces and not just emails. That is one good thing about Zoom. Cities in large part are shaped by their institutions, and I think their institutions are often defined by their ability to innovate. And when you have institutions that can innovate and stay current and relevant, you start to draw top jobs and top companies to an area. And when you start with a product like the St. Louis Symphony that is already nationally and internationally known for its music, and then you put on top of it everything else it has to offer, it speaks volumes for the institution. You can look at what might be the obvious, like we bring tens of thousands of children into Powell Hall each year, although we're finding different ways to do it now. And for those children, it may be the first time they hear live music or touch an instrument. that's a value add that speaks volumes for the institution. When you look at interesting collaborations like with the St. Louis Blues or with the Cardinals, that's not your run-of-the-mill partnership for an orchestra. When you look at the hearts of the members and the hearts of service of our orchestra, the hospital visits they do, the free concerts, that's an institution that changes the community. And we've all got a limited amount of time to spend where we want to spend our time, talent, and treasure. And so for me, it's a pretty easy win to say I want to be part of an organization that's as innovative and as uplifting as the St. Louis Symphony is.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And just, I know we have several questions to get to. I want to get into the meat of some of our discussion today. But Marie-Hélène, I'd like for you to at least just to provide some reflection on comments that Elizabeth just made reference to. I mean, a number of things that the symphony does, our symphony does, is rather unique. How we do these collaborations, when that happens, and despite the challenge, and here, this global pandemic, our SLSO is doing incredible work. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think the essence, our mission is to enrich people's lives through the power of music. And the essence of that mission is really to create access to music for all. And that creating access to music means really speaks of our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then looking at our region and our people is how do we make the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra a center for learning, for education, for enjoyment, for enriching a community, as Elizabeth mentioned, to continue to attract businesses, to attract future employees, to foster a future generation that is committed to its cultural institution. So that's really in looking at the wide range of programming we do. We always love to think of the orchestra as part of everyone's life cycle, so that as your parents are expecting you and you're coming to life, the orchestra is there to craft programs that will take you as a child to the day you leave this planet. So we're really truly crafting a very broad range of activities that offers musical experiences, learning opportunities, and education programs for all, really across the spectrum of communities that we serve in the region.
Do we see a lot of this work and these advancements as we talk about equity, that much of which is occurring because of women where they currently are placed? And as a CEO of a major orchestra, does that have any impact? I mean, you know, is that indeed one of the reasons we can certainly attribute to why there certainly has been advancements in access?
Absolutely. I think there's so much there in terms of how, you know, in my role currently, and as a white woman, very much aware of her own privilege, and also as an immigrant, because oftentimes when people ask me my role today and how I can support the careers of others, and it's interesting that oftentimes in my career I've experienced such challenges a lot more through the lens of being an immigrant than that of being a woman. For example, in my day-to-day life, I don't question what I do because I'm a woman, right? This is not, my gender doesn't define my leadership. And I think I see remarkable leadership from men, remarkable leadership from women. But it's how in my position, working with one of the finest orchestras in the country, how can I enable and foster a culture and an environment where women who engage with us and work with us, and those who are in the orchestra and back in the community, can create this extraordinary network that is encouraging women to continue to seek leadership positions. And leadership can be seen at various layers in life. This is not just being the head of a company. It's in many ways. You can be a teacher who is a leader. You can be a community activist that's a leader. You can be so there's so many different things. 3 years ago, Korn Ferry published an interesting story that a survey after interviewing 40 CEOs in the country of major companies, female CEOs, and it was clear that only 12% of them saw them one day as a CEO of a major company in the US. So how do we give that confidence to women because women will take various paths to leadership. There's not one straight line. So how can we, all of us, whether you on the board or other women in the community, can help other women create that path to leadership, which can be seen in various ways in life. So I think this orchestra is an agent for change. It's an agent for connectivity. It's an agent for, you know, transforming a city into a thriving place where people are all welcome and included in everything we do. So it's an exciting time for us. And I think it's an exciting role we all share in doing this work.
Thank you, Marie-Hélène. I'd like to bring Elizabeth in because you made it reference, and I love the fact that you mentioned that leadership looks very different for all of us, and especially women, because how we enter and how we manage and how we continue to advance, you know, is very different. And I know that Elizabeth, as a trustee of the SLSO and serves on many other boards here in St. Louis, that she, you know, has been a witness firsthand experiencing, you know, exactly, you know, how to navigate, you know, being a woman and being a woman who is certainly seen as a leader and is a leader. So Elizabeth, so what has the experience been for you as we look at our role as leaders, as women leaders, not just for the symphony, but for other places where we serve in that leadership capacity?
So I'm asked that question a lot because of the industry I'm in. I'm in the financial services industry. And people say, oh gosh, you've been there 30 years. What was it like? And what is it like to be a woman in the financial services industry is what I get a lot. And I really answer, well, I'm just a person in the financial services industry. If I had wanted to be in a female dominated industry, perhaps I would have chosen teaching or nursing or something of that nature. Now, that's not to say that my experience isn't different from a man's, because it sure as heck is different from a man's. But I think the first thing that I've always done is given everybody I come in contact with the benefit of the doubt, that they are going to treat me just as they're going to treat anyone else. When they don't, they get a different side of me. But I think when you stand up for yourself, you're teaching other people how to stand up for themselves. And it goes back to what Marie-Hélène was saying. A lot of times, all people need to see is an example. And if they can see it, they can be it. And that starts even with the St. Louis Symphony, when we have the kids in, again, from cradle to, well, cradle to crate isn't very nice, but cradle to birth to death. We want to be part of their experience. It's the same thing in leadership, and making it okay for the people that look up to you, or coaching when you see another woman maybe not handle a situation correctly, to pull them aside and say, I know what you were going for there, but you missed, and here's why that won't work. So I feel that sidebar conversations are a lot more helpful than, you know, sticking your flag in the, and shouting and screaming, although I am known to be, to send the occasional curt email. But, you know, I think you be your best self and always assume that the person means the right thing. And when they don't, you make darn clear that, you know that they have a different intention, and you fix it then.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate that. You know, there's quite a bit of activity going on in the chat, and we love it. So before we move on to some additional remarkable women who will talk a lot more about some of the things that we've already spoken about. But, you know, here's a really interesting question, and I'll throw this back to both Marie-Hélène and also to Elizabeth. I think that we have, let's see, they want to know what your favorite genre of music with orchestral music. So Marie-Hélène, what's your favorite?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. I can't, please don't make me. I have very, very broad loves in my life. Oh my gosh, favorite. I will say that right now, anytime I get to discover the way Stéphane Denève leads an orchestra in a work, whether it was written yesterday or whether it was written 200 years ago, is for me it's my favorite. If it's my favorite music of the moment, because as an artist, it has made me listen to works that I thought I knew in a totally different way. So that would be my answer for now.
Okay. Safe answer, but thank you. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I have a similar answer. You can hear, Bach's variations for the cello, and you can just go, that is the most trite piece of music. I'm so tired of hearing it, I could vomit. And then you can hear someone do it and go,
yeah,
that is the music of angels. So for me, a lot is who's performing it or who's conducting it. So as a player, I play the viola. One of the pieces that you always knew you were going to get when you auditioned for something was probably something out of Tchaikovsky's Fourth. And so as a player, you get so sick of that symphony. And so when you hear it, it's like, ugh. But every once in a while, you'll hear a certain, somebody who really conducts it well, and it's like hearing it for the first time. Mm. So again, similar to Marie-Hélène, it's really who's performing and who's conducting, which is a wimpy answer, but it is an answer.
It is an answer, and I can certainly appreciate both responses. So I want to thank both of you for your time today. We'll see you later on the webinar, but I'd like to at least to open up some additional questions, certainly in the chat, and then we'll talk to a few more panelists today. So again, Marie-Hélène and Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to turn now to Amy Kaiser, who is embarking on her 26th year as director of the St. Louis Symphony Chorus. So Amy,
hi,
how
Sherry.
are you?
Great, how are you?
So glad to have, I'm feeling great today. This has been just a wonderful conversation. And so I'd like to just kind of focus on you. So what inspired you to become a choral director?
Well, I had always loved singing from the age of 3. I fell in love with my mother's 78 recordings of Marian Anderson singing Schubert songs and spirituals. And that spoke to me as a 3-year-old. And then I went on and fell in love with Broadway musical theater and Julie Andrews and Gilbert and Sullivan and opera. And I was going to the Metropolitan Opera every Saturday as a teenager in high school. So it was all, and playing the piano and learning operas at the piano. So it was all vocal music, words and music, not choral music. I never sang in choirs. And then in college, at Smith College, there was this extraordinary pioneer woman conductor named Iva D. Hyatt, who was a real brilliant musician and an inspiring personality. And that transformed my life. I became a choral conductor as a student. And by the time I graduated at age 20, I had already had my first conducting job. She was a true mentor, and I learned so much. And then I went on, I wanted to do something else because there were no, except for her, there were no role models, there were no opportunities for women. You just couldn't think of being any kind of conductor at all. And schools, teaching, that was it. And I studied musicology. I wanted to be a singer. Neither one worked out. Students were protesting and occupying buildings at Columbia University in 1968. Everything was falling apart. And then I got my first job at Smith College. They also offered me my first opportunity to get started as a conductor of their choirs. So that's extraordinary mentorship, and that's how it all happened. Then I became much more involved and studied with other people and really learned the craft of a conductor. But I was always focused on being an opera, an orchestra, and choral director. But the vocal background was clearly my specialty. And so as time went on, I became much more specialized as a choral director. after.
So, Amy, I just want to just interject here, because what I don't want to do is to leave the discussion about how you actually got to where you are today.
Right.
You've been in 50 years. And what I heard, that you are indeed a trailblazer, that you had really no one else, no role model really, in terms of this is how this is supposed to work, you know, to get to point A to point B. You actually had to kind of build that path for yourself. Can you talk a little more about that?
Well, that is the truth. There was one woman at the head of the Chicago Symphony Chorus, Margaret Hillis, who was an extraordinary trailblazer. But her father happened to be, I believe, the inventor of stainless steel or something like that. So she was able to start this professional chorus with family money, you know, and many conductors start their own groups with their own foundations, and to just do an audition and get hired, that's a different story. And I was able to do that. Started out in academia, didn't get tenure, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. And by that time, it was the early 1970s, and the women's movement, the opportunities suddenly were, at least you could dream about it. It was more possible. I still heard people directly say to my face, oh, we can't hire a woman for this, many, many times. However, some other people did. And men and women, if they saw what you did and they were impressed, yes, they would give me an opportunity. So I got a lot of wonderful opportunities in New York as a freelancer. And then I decided to trade in being the director of the B team to being a team player on the A team. And that was when I came here in 1995, as one of the best things that I ever did.
So let's talk about then women conducting. Again, you mentioned that a lot of this simply wasn't taking place at the time when you started your career, but how has that experience been for you? And then just a follow-up question, you know, what is it like to work with the orchestra conductor?
Well, the orchestra conductors are wonderful. I have to say that in 25 years here, I have never once had an experience of any kind of resistance, difficulty, lack of respect, anything like that. I have been treated with such total respect and appreciation for 25 years by everyone within the St. Louis Symphony Organization. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. I've been given autonomy, and also in regarding the music directors and guest conductors. Sometimes I contact them beforehand, sometimes not. Sometimes I try to read their minds. Some of the music directors, of course, I get to work with for many years, so you do get to know each other and can talk about various things. But basically, if I present them with a chorus that is totally prepared, everyone is happy and totally flexible. So they can change some things that we've prepared, that's fine. And everybody will quickly do that. We have some unspoken goals in the chorus. Never stop for a choral problem in an orchestra rehearsal is one of them. Nobody talks about that. But if you can be truly an equal partner with the orchestra, then the conductors will all be thrilled and everybody's happy.
Well, talk a bit about, again, as you've mentioned, and I've certainly noted this, that you are indeed a trailblazer, and I would only imagine that there are a number of women in this industry who see you as a role model, who see you as a mentor. What reflections do you have about some of their experiences, you know, as they are now navigating their own path in this particular area? What do you talk about, and what do you say to them? What do you recommend? How do you help them to be courageous in finding their way through?
Well, you know, actually, I have at this time, I'm here in St. Louis. I live here. This has been a consuming job. I'm not that connected with young conductors coming up through the ranks. I am very happy to live long enough to see that there are young women now coming up through the ranks of orchestral conductors the same way young men come up through the ranks, as always has been. But that is new, to see women starting out as an assistant conductor or associate conductor or resident conductor, and then getting jobs all over the country, all over the world. So that is happening. However, most of those women are not American. And it's the same as the men in the orchestra business. Most of them are. To be an American conductor, male or female, is still not to be the top of the, St. Louis Symphony is very unusual to have had 2 American music directors in the last 50 years. That's very unusual. But I'm thrilled that in the last season, for instance, I've gotten to work with Natalie Stutzman, who was a wonderful European conductor. I'm disappointed I couldn't get to work with Gemma New when we canceled her chorus performance. Now scheduled for January, Karina Kanalakis, who is the only American of that group. Very much looking forward to working with her if we get to do that. But there are these brilliant young women now coming up who are getting opportunities to be orchestral directors and music directors, not just choral.
I'm glad to hear it. No, it's fantastic. And so again, there's been a lot of activity in the chat. And so just want to, actually, I'm going to pull this one, and this is interesting. So obviously you have friends everywhere. So tell me about your favorite color, yellow. What's going on with
my
that?
favorite color, oh, please, they've noticed. Years ago, I used to wear some colors, certain colors, and then I went to somebody who was a color analyst and said, oh no, this picks up the light in your eyes. So I said, okay. So now I have a palette which I enjoy very much, and I've stuck with for, oh gosh, 35 years. So there's
it looks gorgeous on you.
Thank you.
So Amy, I want to thank you, and we're going to turn our attention to a couple of other of your colleagues, actually, who are here. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks very much.
So now for our next segment, I'm so excited to introduce some of our musicians. Melissa Brooks, who is the Associate Principal Cello, Felicia Foland, bassoon, and Amanda Stewart, Associate Principal Trombone. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
The SLSO was a leader in moving to blind auditions. Many people aren't familiar with this process. So could you briefly tell us how it works, and anyone can chime in?
I'm happy to chime in here.
Go for it.
Go for it. Me. This has been a really great conversation so far. So I've taken my share of auditions, and I've been on both sides of the curtain. I've been on the audition committee, and I've been an auditioner. How it works, it's a little different in every orchestra. How it works here is that we start with screening resumes and look at all the resumes, and then see who's qualified to come audition. And people can always come, even if we, don't think it would be the most fruitful thing. But once people get here, they have a place to warm up in the hall, and they're presented with, people receive a list of repertoire, a couple of months ahead of time so they can practice. But once they get here, usually I don't know, somebody chime in if I'm wrong, but maybe an hour before they have to play, they're given the exact list of what we're going to ask, which is, the list is usually about 10 excerpts, orchestral excerpts, depending on what we're auditioning for. If it's for a title position, there will be some solo rep on there. If it's or a section position, it will be more tutti excerpts. And so they're given that list, and there's a carpet put on the floor of the stage so that we can't tell if someone in heels is walking up to play. And so the preliminary round happens. Each person usually gets about 5 minutes to play. And if they advance to the next round, it's the semifinal round, which usually it's a longer time, maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes for each person to play because it's a smaller number of people. And sometimes we usually hear more excerpts at that point. The screen is still up, so we're going just by numbers. We don't know anything about anybody. We don't have resumes in front of us. We don't know anything. And whoever makes it past the semifinal round to the final round, it's usually somewhere between 5 and 8 people, I'd say, at least in the auditions I've been a part of. And then the screen comes down. And what we often do now is we shift from everybody being on stage, including the audition committee, to people performing out into the audience. So the audition committee moves out into the audience, so it's more like a performance. And people will play some of their concertos, which I forgot to mention, there's also solo rep on the lists for everybody to play. If you're a cellist, you'll start out with a Bach suite and maybe a Dvorak concerto or a Haydn concerto. So for the finals, you have a pianist, and you'll play a good portion of whatever we've listed, a major concerto or your Bach suite. And then you play the excerpts, and the conductor will often now go up to the stage and work with the person performing a little bit and then conduct them, just to see how the player reacts to the conductor and can collaborate. And that's the final round. We also have a chamber music round, which I think personally is crucial, because you can really see how a player interacts with other players, which is the most important part of our job. You can see if somebody really listens and somebody's paying attention and can collaborate. And then after all of that is done, and it's been a very long day for everyone at that point, 1 or 2 or however many people are hired, or they're asked to come back and do a trial week with the orchestra, or no one is hired.
Thank you, Melissa. And so just before we move into some of the challenges, even with blind auditions, I like Felicia or Amanda, to chime in just about the process and your perspective of the process.
Well, I'm a longtime serving member of the orchestra. This is my 30th season, 30. So I have a long view. And in many ways, what Melissa described was very much my experience auditioning. So in that way, there hasn't been a lot of change. The orchestra plays at such an incredibly high level, and education is really getting, I think, much better, using kind of a mixture of science and writing, and more people are kind of taking a more academic approach to music in the very best way. I mean, academic. And so the standards are incredibly high. A lot of people play very, very, very well. So now everyone plays so well. Now we have a really broad spectrum of people we could hire. So who do we hire? And now we're getting into how do we determine who is going to be a great St. Louis Symphony Orchestra member, a great orchestral citizen, and then more universally, the person who speaks from the institution in a way that helps nurture and fulfill our very broad mission statement, which to me is a really wonderful, it's not just an empty corporate slogan. I think it's a really live mission that is totally worthy of meeting. So it's an ongoing process. Where the format maybe hasn't changed too much, I think what we want it to do changes.
So Amanda, any additional perspective? And again, there is yet and I do appreciate the detail, because as mentioned, most of us who are, on the call today may not know the details about blind auditions and how they work. But we've certainly have heard some recent, reports, about the pros and cons of blind auditions. But before we get into that, Amanda, just wanted to give you an opportunity to give your perspective just on blind auditions.
Sure. I mean, basically what Melissa has outlined, that's the exact process of what I've gone through for all of my auditions, actually. There's usually several rounds that are blind. And then when you get to the final round, the screen normally will come down, and you'll do some kind of chamber playing in the brass. With brass instruments, you're normally playing within your section, whether that's a trombone section or a horn section or a trumpet section. On an occasion, you might have a larger brass section play. So it's interesting. I think this is the heart of perhaps the discussion. I know for me personally, in the final rounds, I've had one audition where after the screen came down, I didn't get the job. And then a person from the panel called me and said that they were concerned that I was a small girl and they didn't think I was going to be able to keep up. And that's basically why they didn't choose me. So that was one instance. Another instance, something was said by audition committee member, and I ended up getting the job, but it was said, and I was told this by someone on the committee later, that, do we really want a woman in our section? So it's, unfortunately, when the screen comes down, that's where you'll see the discrimination. As soon as we can see with our eyes, that will, usually cue us into our own biases. So I know that there are orchestras in the country right now that are perhaps considering trying to figure out how to have either the screen up the whole time, how they can still do a section round with encapsulating the person. It's challenging because what Melissa is describing, part of what we do, a large part of what we do, is how we communicate with one another in unspoken ways. And we need to be able to see if this person who's auditioning can participate in that process. And having that section round or the chamber round really shows you that. And part of that is, you can see a little bit the movements of your colleagues and respond to that with their physical movements. And then, of course, the other side of it is listening. You pick up a lot of cues without even seeing. So how do you approach that without the visual cues for an individual in a final round, in a chamber round? How can you fully judge that? So I think there's a little bit of a dilemma. However, at the same time, there's also the dilemma of how do you continue the process of the blind audition so that a person is judged on their playing, not their gender.
So I think what we're hearing, because, and thank you so much, and it helps us all to have a higher level of appreciation for what at one point appears to have been the solution to ensure equity, in the process. But again, this is a bit more complicated than that. There is certainly a need to have a more holistic approach to it. So I'd like to turn to the chat because, the chat's blowing up, as they say. There's a lot of great questions here. And I think it's going to allow us to move into some of the pros and cons about blind auditions. So one of the questions says, so when the curtain comes down, race, age, gender, etc., can become a factor. Yes?
Yeah, we're people. Yeah, we have biases. Yeah.
All right, one other follow-up is, so why does the screen come down in the final round?
Well, I think Amanda and Felicia both spoke to that. And again, not every orchestra takes the screen down. The Met Opera Orchestra keeps it up through the whole audition process, and they're a top orchestra in the world. So they've figured out how to do that amongst themselves in a way that works for them. For me, the benefit, like Amanda said, of having the screen come down is seeing how a person can communicate when they're playing and collaborate with others, which in our job really is crucial. I think that the screen has helped women more than it's helped people of color. It's helped white women, because we're already in a privileged place where we've had access to a lot of things that women of color and men of color have not had in this country. So starting from the earliest educational levels, there's already a disparity. And so this goes way beyond the screen. The screen is, whether it's up or down, is not going to be a fixture for having a more truly diverse work environment and orchestral experience. This is a very multi-pronged issue that it needs to be looked at from many different ways. And the screen is, for me, is not really the big issue here.
Listen, are we seeing, and this is again, Felicia, Amanda, are we seeing some leadership in that space when we recognize that the inequities exist before you enter the space, you know, to do an audition? And how do we then address those issues outside of perhaps, you know, our sphere of influence, if you will? So do we see any leadership happening just in that space at all about preparing, you know, future musicians? And so when they do enter into the audition space, that they're aptly prepared.
Is this for me?
Or anyone, as a matter of fact, it's not just,
Yeah.
Love the opportunity. So yes, Felicia, Amanda, chime in, just your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there are organizations that are focusing on that, you know, but I think it's one of those things that work still needs to be done because the issue still exists. You know, we can stop when everyone's treated equally, and will we ever get there? I hope so, but
I think, yeah. I'm sorry, Amanda, did I interrupt?
No, that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think because so many branches of life in America are intertwined. So we're suddenly very interdependent. We have public schools or private schools. And we have, you know, all kinds of things within that. Some public schools have music, but not all. And then some private schools have music, but not all of them. That's, I think, a different kind of a question. So all of a sudden, by the time you're way up here auditioning for something like a St. Louis Symphony, you've left years ago a structure behind that you've either fought through somehow or failed, and you're not here then in that that mode of preparation. Sherry, I think was a word you used, and that's a really important word. So the symphony is sort of like the final product, but that should not excuse us from speaking and acting directly to the beginning, seeds to help nurture that. I think having community partnerships, as we do, are really an avenue here, terribly important and wonderfully effective. But we could probably bake in some stronger things, maybe even into the door of the youth orchestra or fellowship programs. It's a hard nut to crack, as we can see. So maybe as women, because we have had the sort of adaptability, and the word that stuck out to me from Marie-Hélène speaking early was transformation. Maybe we can use our adversity as our platform for creativity and transformation right here, like in this great question. It's kind of easy for me to think about that this week because I'm thinking of someone who, you know, so many women do this kind of work and work through it, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg did in her career.
I do appreciate that because that you actually answered my next question, Felicia. Just was wondering how each of you are using your own voice to make a difference, both either internally or externally, as we talk about these issues around, you know, the power of women, you know, and making sure that as we navigate our own paths, that we're also considering other things in terms of how we can provide opportunities for others, as we are looking at a lot of transformation happening just with symphony orchestras across the country. So this is fabulous. I know that, and we all know on the call here that SLSO has been in such a leadership role on many issues around this topic itself. And so just want to commend all of you for your ability to think about this a bit more deeply and how best to go about moving a number of things forward. So I like to, because we're not going to let anybody off, of the call today without kind of getting into some of the things that we're here about that we love, which is the music itself. So talk to me about perhaps, and again, for those, Melissa and Amanda, to talk about maybe your favorite piece, something that just, when you imagine, when you go to your happy place, that this is the piece for me. And I'll start with you, Amanda.
Oh, that's so hard. That is a really tough one. Yeah. There are probably a lot that I could choose from. There are many that I could choose from. I think I'm partial to Mahler symphonies. And I think that's just the way Mahler wrote for the trombone in general. The trombones are always featured throughout his symphonies. But I've had the privilege and opportunity to travel internationally with orchestras. And I've played a lot of those. So, and so I'm, if you think about, so for me, it's like a memory of a place, a memory of a hall, a memory of a tour, a memory of, so there's a lot of memories that have developed for me around pieces. So if I think of, let's say Mahler Symphony No. 6, I traveled with Boston and I played that during the proms, or I played that in, or else I played probably Leipzig or so, so the symphonies, they start having memories attached to them. And so it's like, when you play them again, it's like, oh, this is my old friend. I remember when I was here, and I remember playing with so-and-so. And really that's probably for many of us, that's hundreds of pieces at this point. But for me, it's based also around the fact that I get to be more involved because Mahler wrote more extensive trombone parts. So Mahler.
Thank you. Melissa, your favorite?
Again, like everybody else has said, it's possible to pick a favorite. I agree with Amanda. If I were never to play another Mahler symphony, I would be heartbroken. There is something about playing Mahler on stage that is, to me, like nothing else. They're unbelievably powerful symphonic works that encompass just every life emotion you could imagine. They're just so amazing. But in terms of having a favorite piece, it's mood dependent. It's what's going on in life for the country or what's going on in my household during the day. It might, be a Mozart sonata, or it might be Prokofiev 5, which I've actually been listening to a lot lately because I do really miss being on stage, and that's such a great piece. I love Schoenberg. It runs the gamut. It just depends on where I am. And it depends on who's playing. And, chamber music, has my heart, and, there's so much great repertoire out there. It's impossible to pick.
I know it's hard. And I do appreciate the fact that you mentioned it just depends on where you are in the world today. And our music allows us to pick and choose because it is indeed a feeling. It's so close to our heart and our spirit. And so, Felicia, you've been nodding like yes, and yes. So tell us about you. Yeah.
Well, I'm out of the box, and I am a absolutely shameless romantic. So actually, and my answer might surprise you a little bit. I adore and love the very highly communicative music of film director film composer Ennio Morricone, who just died earlier this year, late last year, fairly recently. And I love his music because actually a lot of it was written without words for film. So it has like tons and tons of character and context. And it is very much, you can tell from his name, he's Italian. It's very much taken from sort of like the 18th century Italian church music. In some ways it's very traditional, but he used the animal of the orchestra incredibly creatively. If you look up his music or some of his film scores, you'll notice that some of them then have had words set to them later to sort of add a context and put the song more squarely in a story, if you will. Often his wife did that. He would not just allow a lyricist to come in and make something that was not intended. So it's just incredible. Anyway, that's the hill I'm going to die on here. Film music. I'm not proud. not at all. I play for a living, you know.
Well, I will say this, that this is indeed a lunch and learn, and I'm looking at the chat, and let me tell you, so many people are saying, I didn't know, I'm glad to know this, and I'm sure they're making and taking notes, and they're going to look up, you know, they're going to be Google is my friend, let me see what's happening with this. So you have actually opened up a whole plethora of things for a lot of people. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So, you know, and again, I don't want to leave, I know we are just almost at time, but I don't want to leave, you know, all the folks out there without having an opportunity for each of you to talk a little bit about, you know, maybe about 30 seconds each about your time with the St. Louis Symphony, what it has meant to you. I know we don't show up in the world without others. And so if there's a reflection about what it's meant for you and your family and friends, but just if you'll spend about 30 seconds, because again, I think that's something that to me, selfishly, I love to hear that all the time. So we'll start with you, Amanda.
Sure. So I was thinking about this before this session began. And the one thing I really love about this orchestra is, and it's relates to this topic, is this is an orchestra where my gender has never been an issue, ever, with any of my colleagues. And that's not something I can say about other orchestras I've been a member of. So the atmosphere, the culture here is really extraordinary. And this orchestra is known in our industry for, basically, we're kind of like a big family. We look after each other. We're very professional. We're excellent at our craft, but we care about one another. And that doesn't exist everywhere either. So I really love my colleagues. I really love working with them. I miss them. I miss making music with them. It's great to see them here in little boxes. I'll take it. It's a little bit of a taste of working together. So I love this orchestra.
Thank you, Amanda. Melissa?
Well, this is my 28th year with the orchestra. I got the job right out of college. So I was very young. I was 22. And honestly, music has always been something that has saved me throughout my life. Regardless of what's going on, it's what I've been able to turn to. And getting this job at a young age and being able to have my freedom was a hugely important thing for me at that time for a multitude of reasons that don't matter right now. But it gave me a life and my freedom, and it's such a beautiful place to work. And because I've been here longer than Amanda, I can say that it's always been an amazing place to work. Culturally, it has shifted. You know, when I got into the orchestra, there were plenty of women in the orchestra, but there was still some unpleasantness to deal with certain men in the orchestra. And that's just the way it was. That has changed, thankfully. And my colleagues are the best colleagues in their musical beauty and standards, and personally, and it's a really dear group of people who I just adore.
I do appreciate that. Thank you, Melissa. Felicia.
Yeah, well, I'm a St. Louis woman. So first time I heard the orchestra, my school was bused down to Powell Hall, and I was 10. And that was my introduction to classical music, though my father did love it. I owe an enormous thanks to, you know, everything, whether it's people appreciating classical music and therefore giving their children lessons. My parents, my family are an enormous thank you. Of course, they're all gone now. I'm old, they're already gone. But the youth orchestra, I was so grateful that the symphony had these long arms of of work in the community, youth orchestra is so terribly important for me. And it's still to this day one of my favorite orchestras in America. Maybe only first or second to St. Louis Symphony. So I'm totally a company woman, you know, even though I came, you know, up through the ranks and into the orchestra, it was still the same thing, blind audition and all that. The orchestra were my mentors. And I did have one female bassoon teacher, my very first bassoon teacher. I was only with her 6 months as she moved, but I just can't, I can't say enough about how the mission of the orchestra, I am living proof of it, that my life has been improved through music. And that's why it's so easy for me to be here, give back, preach.
Well, I want to thank everyone. I know that we are at time, and I just, again, thank you for such a wonderful, wonderful discussion today. We want to thank our guests for joining us. So Marie-Hélène Bernard, Elizabeth Mannen, Amy Kaiser, Melissa Brooks, Felicia Foland, and Amanda Stewart. We want to thank the Stewart Family Foundation, all those who support the SLSO. We'd like to invite you to continue to engage with the SLSO online through social media, YouTube, and slsostories.org. We hope everyone will mark your calendars for the next Lunch and Learn on Wednesday, October 21st at 12 noon. So check your email inbox in the next week or two for an invitation with details. And to depart, we would like to share with you a duet performed by Felicia Foland and her student Ben Wepler, who is also a member of our very own youth orchestra. So thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.